tuning in the program called What's Going on FlintTalkRadio.com. I think the camera that I'm looking in is the one right here, and so many cameras in here, as I always say, that I have to look around and see which one it is, which one it is, because we're more sophisticated now than we were when I first got started 6 years ago, and we are continuing to grow and develop and trying to bring you the best possible shows that we can. And I want you to stay tuned to the program called What's Going On for the next hour. I'm George Moss, the host of the program, and normally during the second and fourth Mondays, we have our co-hostess here, Ms. Catherine Hunter Williams, and she's not here this afternoon because of the Memorial holiday. But as you know, those who've been tuning in the program for the last 6 years, you know my motto is the show must go on, and come rain, shine, sleet, or snow. I'm just like the mailman or the mailwoman. We will persevere and do the program unless we are snowed out. Rain doesn't stop us. That's rain, shine, sleet, or snow. Sometimes snow stops us, but that's about the extent of it. And we're very glad to have you out there on this very important holiday. We're going to talk today about Memorial Day and some of the things that dishonors the celebration. And then I want to talk a little bit about one of my posts that I did last Sunday on the legacy of Malcolm X and the assassination of Malcolm X. I wanted to continue that discussion. I didn't know until I got here that Catherine wouldn't be here. I forgot she said that she would not be here this afternoon. But I had come here ready to do battle with my co-hosts about what we talked about in our study group, and I brought my document today, so I wanted to read some of the things from it, and I will probably do that before we get off the air if we have a chance. We're going to start out, though, talking first of all about the Memorial Day celebration and try to add a few things maybe that no one else is talking about, and hopefully invite you into the conversation about this most important of our holidays. All of the celebrations of the national holidays are important, but when it comes down to honoring those who have served the country, Memorial Day, which is a celebration of those who are the fallen warriors, unlike Veterans Day, which takes place on November the 11th, which celebrates all of the ones who have served the country in uniform. This day today celebrates the fallen warriors, those who died on the battlefields defending this country's freedoms. And before coming to the studio, I posted on that, and I'm going to be sharing that with you before the program is over. But I want to start out, first of all, by giving you a little bit of the history of how this observance occurred and the beginning point for it. And it goes all the way back to the 19th century. We did not have it at the beginning of the country history, which would have been in the aftermath of the war between the 13 colonies and Great Britain, where we gained the independence of this country under the outstanding leadership of such figures as George Washington and Patrick Henry and a whole host of others, the ones that wrote, the 5 members on the committee that wrote the Declaration of Independence, and all of those persons who, the 300,000 persons that fought in the Revolutionary War, and were tenacious in their determination to be free. In the aftermath of that, which ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1783, after the war had been fought, if you date the war July the 4th, 1776, at the beginning point of the Declaration of Independence, then that war that lasted 7 years and ended with the treaty signed in Paris in 7 years later in 1783, as I said, then that would be something that we can include now in the memorial, but that's not the beginning point. The beginning point of it was the aftermath of a war that cost more American lives than any war that we fought in this nation's history combined, and that includes the beginning of the country's, at the very commencement of the country's beginning points, and including The second war, as I call it, for independence, which was the War of 1812, when the British invited themselves back on and we had to show them what for a second time. And that's the beginning of our national song, the national anthem, written by Francis Scott Key in 1814, where he was talking, as the song does, memorializing that our flag was still there, tattered and torn as it was. He looked out and saw the flag still flying in the breeze. And that's why everyone who sings the song, except Aguilera, remembers the words that says, and our flag was still there. And Francis Scott Key's memorialized that in the song called, that we now know as our national anthem. But the Memorial Day celebration itself, that starts out really as what was called at that time the Decoration Day. And the idea was just you go to the cemeteries and you decorate the grave sites, put the American flag there, plant some flowers and things like that. And you remember the cost that was paid. And in the Civil War, the cost was 600,000 Americans that lost their lives. If you look at the fact that that war was fought from 1861 to 1865 and lasted 4 years, you'll see that the average was 150,000 soldiers, not soldiers, but Americans that died each year that war was fought. We're not talking about just soldiers here, particularly when Sherman and Grant began to create what was called total war, which really was the first time we saw total war, where you in fact bring the civilian population into the military landscape. The first time we saw that happening here on the American soil was not at the beginning of this war. People were at the Battle of Manassas, which was also called the Battle of Bull Run, the first battle that was fought in the Civil War. People were out there as if they were on a picnic on the sidelines, because here was an army for this side, there was an army of that side, and they were out there as if they had gone to a picnic to observe two enactments that we do right now of the war, thinking this war would not last that long. But this war lasted 4 years, and then in that time period, particularly, as I said, in the aftermath of then this war becoming a total war, where it's not just the military, it is in fact being engaged with the civilian population now caught up in this war also, and some of them, as quiet as it was kept, were in fact being targeted. I think there were 300,000 plus that were killed in the northern part of the country, and 200 and some odd thousand plus that died in the south, which is quite interesting when you think about the fact that most of the war was fought in the southern part of the country. But after that war came to a close, the idea was to pay some homage to those who had given their lives, both on the battlefield and those that were in the civilian population. And it started out just decorating the grave sites and things of that sort, had not yet become a national observance as Memorial Day. In fact, when you look at the history of Memorial Day, which now takes place on the fourth Monday in May of every year, and that would have been what was installed by Congress as the institutionalization of the day in 1968. I remember when I was in school, we would get out on May the 31st, the last day of the month, and I'm sitting in class. I'm not even thinking about what the observance was really about, and it wasn't really talked about that much at that time. I graduated from high school in 1961, and I didn't hear a lot of talk about the observance. It was just something as students, I think we just looked at it as the day to get out of school, and we look forward to that. But we didn't really think of it in terms of what it meant in terms of paying homage to those who have died for this nation's freedom, because as we always say, and we certainly can attest to this, freedom is not free, and every generation is going to be sent the bill uh, for it, because freedom will never be free. And every generation has to, in fact, pay for the freedom that it enjoys. And there will never be a time when the freedom has been secured by the preceding generation and there's nothing for the one that is now current to do in the name of freedom. That will always be something to do along this line. And so we go back and we kind of pay homage now in a much more holistic way. I think before Richard Nixon made it a national observance, I think what was going on prior to that, since it was moved from the 31st to the fourth Monday in May in 1968, and then 3 years later, President Nixon signed into law a bill passed by Congress which would, in fact, make the observance a national holiday. I think what was happening before that was that each state did its own observance, and of course, you would have varying circumstances and maybe even some different time periods for it. But it was in fact nationalized in terms of it being a national holiday in 1971. And we pay homage because the persons that have fallen for this country's freedoms need to be remembered. We don't want to forget the sacrifices that were in fact made. And I said, I wrote a post before coming to the studio, and I titled it, has a time, I said Memorial Day, has a time come for us to stop insulting our fallen warriors? And I was alluding to the fact that we have all these scandals going on right now, three scandals taking place simultaneously that we know about, and I'm sure there are others that have not yet surfaced at this point, and probably something will happen down the road, because I think what we have here is a government out of control. I was even listening to the hearings, and I was bothered by the hearings on the IRS. I didn't hear anything in there that made me feel that we were actually beginning to deal with the problem and bring the government under some type of control so that we can put it back underneath the Constitution and then begin to pay some homage to these soldiers that are falling for the freedoms of this country. I'm not talking about this lip service, which is what I see going on in Washington right now, because as I said in my post, I don't see anyone talking about, in terms of the IRS, I don't hear anybody talking about abolishing the IRS. It's interesting that they're talking about reforming a KGB enterprise, which is what it is. And I said I'm not shy about this. I said in my post that when you have the name, the Internal Revenue Service, how many of you think that when they send you a letter that's about service?
I like that when Steve Miller. I like when Steve Miller, the director, said we provide a horrible customer service. I went, customer service. Gee, a customer means I have some kind of volitional, purpose that I can be around with, that I can actually choose not to see you people. I can't choose to see you people or not. You decide.
That's
for
right,
me.
and you better get down there.
One of these to say, you're actually trying to rein in on how we can torture you.
That's right.
How dare you? Yeah.
Yeah, that is an oxymoron, if there ever was one. And this idea that this is Internal Revenue Service, if anything, is Internal Revenue Secret Service or Internal Revenue Disservice. But to put service on the end of that word, and that's what they do. They do this misdirection, and that's certainly an example of it, where you have this misdirection so that you are being told one thing when the narrative doesn't fit the reality. And there are many different examples of that. But no, I don't think we can use the word service. But what I'm waiting to hear, and I'll be waiting until the cows come home to hear this, and that is that we are actually talking about something that's really relative to fixing the problem with the tax system, which we've only had in place since 1916 in terms of taxing persons' income, and that's part of the problem there. But if you're going to have a taxation of income, it ought to be across the board, and it should be one which is proportional for all citizens. I like what Ben Carson said, that if you make $1 million, you pay, if you have a flat tax, you pay 10% of that, which means then you pay $100,000 and just pay that. You don't need a bureaucracy to do it. I was asking a person on Facebook who was telling me about he was in fact in business, and I asked him, did he see himself correctly, as I was stating, as a tax collector? Because the employers collect taxes. What do you think you're doing when you have your check and your check says this is the amount of money you made and here's what you're going to actually get? What happened to the other part between what you made and what is actually in your paycheck? Well, that's already been distributed to the government because the employer is a tax collector. So this idea that you need the IRS is nothing other than the politicians. And if you're out there, you politicians, because I know some of you watch FlintTalkRadio.com because you want to know what we do here. That's how big we're getting and how important our voice is becoming throughout the United States, particularly since we've gone to Ustream, and we're streaming live and also on tape on YouTube and other sources, and people are tuning us in here at FlintTalkRadio.com. And I'm sure that you're out there interested in what we're saying here. And what I'm saying, quite frankly, is pretty consistent with what I'll continue to say and what I've said in the past. And that is that we have government gone wild, and this idea that what we're doing right now in Washington is a charade. I don't know, it's an honest investigation. Not that you can have an honest investigation when all of the institutions of government have been corrupted, and it's ridiculous and ludicrous for us to think that the government can, given its immoral standing, can investigate itself. I won't believe that until I see some evidence of it, and there's absolutely no evidence of it right now. I tell you what I'd like to see in terms of the IRS investigation, though, and that is, I would like to see just one of the persons that's serving on these various committees, whether it's ESA's committee, the House Oversight Committee, or the House Ways and Means Committee that is chaired by I think Dave Cash is his name, or any of these other committees. It's like all the committees, and in fact the Senate Finance Committee. It looks like all these committees are trying to get before the cameras to act as if they're doing something relative to resolving this problem. But yet I've not heard one member of the House, nor one member of the Senate, how quiet they are. No one has mentioned that this is an opportune time to look at abolishing the IRS and going to a flat tax, which you don't need 90,000 people to oversee the tax system. You have the employers collecting the tax and sending it to the federal government. If you had a flat tax, what that would mean is there's a percentage of your income which you take out each check, so at the end of the year you paid your taxes, and there's no need to have any filing that goes on, and it would raise more revenue. So then the question becomes, and I'm going to raise this question to those in the viewing audience and also the IRS and those who are listening in. Maybe you'll learn something here. Maybe those 90,000 persons that are working in the IRS, most of whom are what you call civil servants. They're not appointed, except in the hierarchy, the IRS commissioner and things of that sort that are appointed by the president, and it's they that set the tone underneath their titles that sets the tone inside of the IRS and license it to do what we've seen happening in this latest fiasco, which wasn't the first time. We saw the same thing happening a generation ago during the Nixon administration. Very few persons are aware, perhaps, that there was 3 impeachment charges that were going to be brought against Nixon if he had not resigned. And one of them was the inappropriate use of the IRS. So this is nothing new here. And I don't know what they're trying to act like this is something that really came as a shock to our representatives.
Well, Johnson started using it too back then as a tool to intimidate people who criticize some churches in Texas.
Yes.
And he said he sicked the IRS on them. So I'd like to keep people aware of that. the Democrats have more of a history of abuse with using the IRS
Yeah.
as their watchdogs than
Yeah.
probably the Republicans do.
John, and that's critical to understanding why this is such a charade. If you looked at it as something that was out of the ordinary and was an aberration, you would say, okay, then I see that this happened, and we have got to fix it because it's not broken. It's just that the renegades out here went and did some things that were inappropriate. When you look at the history, as you were saying, that goes back certainly at least to, and probably go back before that. I think there was some abuse of it during the. If there was no abuse in the previous administration, that would be shocking, because look at what Roosevelt was doing in packing the court. You're telling me that he was in fact not using the federal government in other inappropriate ways when he was trying to put people on the Supreme Court, which is a separate institution, not under the auspices of the executive branch of government. This is part of the separation of powers, where this body is supposed to check on that body, and here this president is in fact intruding into a space that's outside of the executive branch of government. And am I supposed to believe that he was not intruding in other parts of the federal government that was in fact violating the tenures, the strictures of law in this country? That would be very difficult to believe. So I think there's a history to it. And so this feigning that everybody's surprised, they can't believe what happened, and we got to fix it, as if the rot is not internal to the very structure of the Internal Revenue Service. If they were serious, somebody would have mentioned the abolishment of the Internal Revenue Service, and I hear crickets out there.
They won't because they need people out who are zealots to get money for them. That's, politicians just love everybody else's money. That's all they're in it for. Nobody
Yes.
can make any compelling case saying they're there for service. They start out with nothing. When they leave office after so many years, they're billionaires almost. And you gave a statistic last week about what's the percentage of millionaires in this country, and what's the percentage of millionaires in the House and Senate, and senators are, 55% of the Senate, 55%?
50%
Of them are millionaires, multimillionaires.
And John, and what they are doing, quite frankly, if we just want to be totally honest here, and we do want to be totally honest, is that what they did, most of them, if you look at their backgrounds, we don't have any of them hardly working, and none of them hardly worked as business owners, yet they want to run business. And most of them, if you look at their professions, there are more lawyers in Congress than there is from any other profession. And why is that? Well, what do lawyers do? They in fact shake down businesses. I mean, I'm so sick of getting these people sending me these things that say, we have a class action lawsuit. If you were a part of this group and this was what occurred while you were there doing these years, then send us your telephone number, your address, your particulars, and you're part of the lawsuit. And then what happens is you get all these people from all over the country that's involved in the lawsuit. Your share of it is $30 of all the money that's divvied up, and there's billions of dollars involved. And the lawyers who shook down the business in your name, they take away, the treasurer, and nothing but a shake down the business. And that's what they do. And what they do is they carry that kind of corruption into Congress, and that's how they become millionaires, as quiet as it's kept. It's explained in a book written by Thomas DeLorenzo, in his book called How Capitalism Saved America. I would suggest you read chapter 14 of that book, the last chapter in the book, because he goes into that in terms of what they're doing. I mean, they look at these businesses as part of their extension of their pocketbooks, and that's why you have 1% of the American people, the millionaires, and 50% of them are millionaires in our Congress. You can't have that kind of wealth created once they arrive in Washington.
I was wondering, in all 2,000 pages of Obamacare, I wonder if they address tort reform, stopping of frivolous lawsuits against, healthcare providers and pharmaceutical companies and stuff. I bet you that's not even addressed in that 2,000 pages of legislation, and that would have gone a long way to lower the cost for everybody for medical coverage. That would have gone a long way, but you can't talk about that. It's sacrosanct because, as you again alluded to, most of the bulk of people who are in Congress start all as lawyers or are still lawyers.
Boy, that is a real problem, and I think on Memorial Day we need to reflect upon on that more so today than other days. But it should be a part of our reflection on our government on a daily basis. As I was saying earlier, my post was asking, when do we start to fix this and begin to really honor the fallen warriors? If this is honoring the fallen warriors that we see going on right now, where I just have to say this, I think it is true, is that none of our institutions in the federal government works. There are some that are more public than others, like the IRS, which we all have some affiliation with because we're working and we have to deal with the IRS. But those agencies that are more concealed behind the public, outside the public domain, those agencies are not responsible and accountable either. And so no, I'm willing to say that no federal agency in this country works, and no part of our federal government, in terms of the executive branch, legislative branch, and the judicial branch, of government, none of those branches actually work. And the check and balance system, that's broken down. And I was offended. I think I took a little bit of different view of Sarah. What was her last name? She was the person that was pretty much orchestrating the attack upon the Tea Parties. Sarah, was it? I don't want to misappropriate her name, but she's been put on absent on leave with full pay. In other words, she's on vacation right now.
Oh, you mean from the IRS?
From the IRS.
Lerner, yeah.
That's the person.
Her last name's Lerner, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you see what they're doing is, for example, with Lerner, she's on paid leave. That's vacation till things quiet down, and if it doesn't quiet down, then she's got to go as a person of sacrifice to maintain the idea that this is now credible because we changed the bodies and around. The fact is that in the job that Lerner had before she became this person that was over that particular part of the IRS, the fact of the matter is that she was doing the same thing as an attack dog in a phone position. That's coming out in the news now. So nobody should be surprised that this is going on inside of that beltway, because that's how they operate. In fact, there was an article that I read. I think it's the most insightful article I read about why the Tea Party was in fact attacked, and why they held them in abeyance while everybody else was getting their 501(c), and there was no problem. These agencies are getting tax exempt status, and over here these are the ones on the right are not getting it. The Tea Party through 2 and 3 different election cycles, and this article pointed out what was really going on here, and basically what was going on is still going on, and it's not going to stop. Is that the party that's in power, which is really both parties? That's another thing we miss. You see, what we fail to understand is that you have a majority in the House that is Republicans, and a majority in the Senate that is in fact Democrat, and you have the president as a Democrat, and you think that because 2/3 of the government, listen very carefully here, you think that 2/3 of the government is controlled by the Democrats, and the Democrats are in power. Let me just tell you this, a little side point. Both parties are in power. And even if one party has all 3 of the canons of government, for example, let's say that as it was in 2009, when Obama first took office on the 20th of January 2009, let's say that you have the president who was elected as a Democrat and is Democratic president, taking over from George Bush, the Republican, and then he came in at a time when the House and the Senate was under the jurisdiction of the Democratic Party. Okay, all three of those institutions, the House, the Senate, which is the Congress, and then the executive branch, which is the president, all three are in the hands of Democrats. Now, you may say, well, the Democrats are in power. No, both parties are in power. And that's what I'm getting at in terms of this article that I think is the most brilliant analysis that has been written. The question is, why was the Tea Party group, why were the Tea Party groups targeted and not a single Republican in the Beltway was under scrutiny by the IRS? That's the $64,000 question. And the answer to that question is not all that complex. It's because both parties that are in power, that's the Republican Party, even if they don't control the two branches of the Congress, the House and the Senate, let's say they're a minority voice in each of those, even though they are not the majoritarian voice, they still are in power. Maybe lesser than the other group that can outvote them, but they're in power because they're in the institution of power. And what was happening with the Tea Party was that this group here was a threat, probably more so when you think about it, a threat, after the election's over, in terms of the election of 2012, they are a threat to the Republican Party because what the Tea Party is trying to do is upset what I call a sweetheart relationship between the members of the Democratic Party and members of the Republican Party. Those guys are basically in a romantic relationship where each one of them is playing hard to get, the love of the trap that's hard to get. But what is that really about? Neither one of them is trying to overthrow the way Washington operates. That's why we don't hear them talking about getting rid of the IRS and going to a flat tax. You see, John, that's one thing that I disagree a little bit with what you said earlier. You see, if it was about money, you would actually get more money by having a flat tax because what you're doing now is you're bringing all the other persons, the ones that Romney talked about and got in all this trouble about, the 47% that are not paying any taxes, while the others talk about they're not paying their fair share. No one talked about the 47% not paying any share. It's just, but that's
and the 47% are the ones asking for more and more. They want more done for them.
More and more of that, which is being paid for by the ones they're criticizing for not paying their fair share.
They would get more. I've tried to tell people this. If with a flat tax, they would get more money coming in because another thing is printing all those forms and that the IRS has. That costs buku bucks.
Yes.
All the distribution of those, the training that they have to give in the seminar, those all cost money. If you just put it on a postcard. Basically, you say, "Here's what I made." Then you transfer funds if you owe them at the end of the year. That's it. You would see so much money coming into the coffers of the United States. So much more.
Yes, John. If it were about the income, they would in fact lower taxes because the 4 times that they've actually lowered taxes in the history of the country, you saw it under Ronald Reagan, for example. And under John F. Kennedy. So don't just make it one party against the other. We have history on both sides of the political divide. Every time they have lowered taxes, the revenue has increased. Now, why would that be the case? As if we can't figure this out. That's why I was saying in another post that I did about what France just did. This is madness here. Anyone in France, 8,000 people in France that make more than 1 million francs, they're going to tax them at a rate of 75% for every franc they make over 1 million francs in this French former French Republic, this socialist state. And all the countries, by the way, are moving toward socialism. This is a point made by Ludwig von Mises in his pamphlet called The Anti-Capitalist Mentality. And all the countries around the world are, in fact, going down the socialist road. There are no exceptions to that. And this idea, you were talking about this language, this idea that we have a mixed economy, that's another part of misdirection in this country. We don't have a mixed economy in this country. If you have you have socialism and you have communism. Those are two systems, right? Now, when you begin to mix those two into another economic frame, that's not a mixed economy. That's a hybrid that you created. It's neither this nor that. It's something different from that. But it's not mixed. It is what Mises points out. So I just want you to be aware of these things that are going on that misinform, misdirect, and confuse you about what's taking place. The fact of the matter is, every time they lower taxes, the income has increased. So it's not just about money.
Don't you just love the fact that the Democrats love to put the credit to the booming economy of the '90s totally on the backs of Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
He balanced the budget. It's the House and Senate who want to pass appropriation bills. That's what can increase or decrease your deficit. It was they that didn't do what was supposed he wanted to do. If they had done what he had wanted to done, we'd already been in this financial crisis 12, 14 years before the time we are in it now.
You're exactly right. The fact is that it was that tension between the Democratic president, Bill Clinton, and the House, where you have the appropriation of tax and things of that sort. Those bills have to start in the House by the mandate in Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution. Yes, Article 1, Section 3 sets up the Senate. But in the House, where the one of the delegated powers they had in Article 1, Section 8, Article 1, Section 8, which has 18 clauses in it, they spelled out that all bills that have to do with taxation, things of that sort, have to start in the House of Representatives, because it's a body that comes before the voters with more regularity, 3 times as often as those members in the Senate, so they can be held accountable if they do things as untoward, given how the public views their political behavior. So they put it in that body. So this idea that Clinton did all of these things and it happened on his watch, it's very interesting that he took office in 1993, and we didn't see any of those things taking place. Only when the people rose up against Clinton in the midterm election in 1994 and had what is called the Republican Revolution. That some revolution that was, but at least it did something to pull back the reins of government, and it allowed for the growth that we have Clinton taking a bow for. But really, it goes to the tension that was created by the midterm election. We need to have more of that going on in terms of having turnout, which I'm waiting to see what happens in 2014, now that we have the IRS scandal out there in front of the public, and see how it plays out politically. But if it was just about money, if this was just about raising revenue, which is what the government says that it wants, because it wants to pay its bills, and maybe if it was able to do that, it could stop printing $85 billion a month, throwing worthless paper out here and devaluing the currency, which is going to come home to roost, but hasn't come home to roost now, because the first time in world history we see every government around the world is in fact doing that. That's why we have not paid the price for it yet. If we were in fact devaluing our currency while other countries' currencies were in fact stable, then you would have had this internal collapse, which is on the horizon. It would have taken place already by now. But everybody is doing the same thing, with the possible exception of China, which they're trying to get them to devalue their currency, and that's what they're screaming about as far as China's policies are concerned. Because if one country's currency is stable while everybody else is debasing their currency, then that currency there becomes the standard bearer in the international community and hurts all these other currencies that are out there, and so on. That's really why you have the euro out there, because socialism doesn't work, and it doesn't work inside the national landscape. What they try to do in Europe was internationalize it so that they could back each other up in their socialist misdirection and the misfit economies that they're running, because the only system that's ever worked and is ever going to work is capitalism. I don't care what they say. The problem in the world is not the exploitation of the capitalists. If you look around the world, anybody can see it. If you look at it through lens that have not been put on you by the political meisters, the ones who are magicians who make the facts disappear, you'll see that wherever there's an absence of capitalism, there's a presence of poverty. And there are no exceptions to that. So it's amazing they can sell this idea of socialism, given that its track record is abysmal and is absolutely zero. There are no successes in it. And yet they continue to tout this idea that somehow we're going to have socialism, which is really the state that is in fact doing what is not done under the free market and private property and things of that sort. We're not going to see that because that's an impossibility. The state is going to do what we see going on right now. And the problem we have in this country is that we have socialized the economy of the United States. It's not mixed. You can't mix it and say there's a mixed economy and it has capitalism. The fact that it's mixed means that it's a hybridization that's created another economic system. So it's not. So my basic point here is that it's not really finance that this is about. If it was finance, you would do that which brings in the most revenue for the government to do its job. And I'll tell you another thing, the aspect to it, that if it were about finance, the flat tax will give the government more than the approximate, let's see, what is that amount that it raises? The government raises $2.5 billion in taxes a year. And if you break that down, divided by 12, that would give you what they're actually getting per month. But if you had a flat tax, the government would be getting more money per month, which will allow it to pay its bills as it goes along. And at the end of the year, you would not have a deficit that would be in the tune of 1.2 to 1.3 trillion in addition to the $2.5 trillion the government is in fact raising through its tax revenue. So it would have more revenue through the flat tax than it has through the use of the IRS, where they're exempting a large segment of the population, and then they're trying to act like the rich are not paying their fair share. And you probably notice they never do tell us what the fair share is, where we can see if they're paying it. Because if you look at the numbers, you can see that is in fact misdirection, because the rich are paying most of the taxes in this country. I mean, what is that number? 1% paying 38%, 5%, the top 5% of the income earners paying 60%. And then when you get to the top 10%, you're talking about paying 70% of the taxes. Look at that. That means 90% of the people are paying 30% of the taxes, the top 10% of the income earners. And if you want to know what would happen if the money was not taxed out of your pockets to the tune of what is happening, look at what Kevin Durant did this past week in Oklahoma. This country was filled with that kind of philanthropy among the American people. Kevin Durant, who plays for the Oklahoma team, donated $1 million of his own money for the victims of that hurricane. And that's what would happen if the money was in fact left in the communities where the community could bail itself out. But if they did that, there's no political reward for the ones in Washington. So what they do, of course, is use a tax policy to confiscate wealth so that they get the credit for the distribution of income. But look what Kevin Durant did, just one example of what used to happen 24/7 in this country when the American people were picking up that slack. We didn't have the government coming in to rescue people from tornadoes.
Well, look at back in '53 when Flint got hit by the tornado. It was Mott and other people, C.S. Mott, his group, donated a lot of money to rebuild this area. I don't think we got federal funds.
No, we didn't. It was, and that was another opportunity for the politicians to get in front of the voters and take bows. But where did the money come from? It didn't come out of their pockets. It came out of the pockets of the American people whose income they were seizing, under the idea that you're not paying your fair share. Well, they're not going to go to the flat tax. If they were even thinking about it, we would have heard some noise about it by now, because this investigation has been going on for a while. I think this is the fourth or fifth week where we've been investigating the IRS after this whistle was blown by those that were inside that structure. We've heard one word about it from ISA, that's your committee, the House Oversight Committee. We haven't heard anything from the committee on the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee. They're actually trying to make us believe that this is an oxymoron, this is an aberration, this is something that's unusual, and that all it will take to fix it is to move some bodies around, and we've seen no evidence of that. This the IRS is broken by its very nature, and the reason why they're not going to get rid of it is because it's about power. You're not going to have the government take out of its arsenal of weapons things it can use as a club to keep the American people in check, and that's why they were directing it at anyone whose voice that they disapproved of. They were going after that voice. And isn't it interesting that they were going after a group that has an adversarial relationship, not only with the Democrats, they have an adversarial relationship with the Republican Party. Listen to John McCain. Listen to this guy that was saying the other day, this guy was the president, the nominee for the Republican Party for the office of president of the United States in 2008. Listen what John McCain said last week, that the Tea Party members, those that were sent to Congress, 87 people that were sent to Congress in 2010, are putting too much stress on the Democrats. I mean, I thought John McCain should have then, based on that alone, changed his party. This guy has been fighting Ted Cruz, whose voice I think is more authentic, quite frankly, than what I'm hearing out of Rand Paul. And Marco Rubio, I think he should just change parties, quite frankly. What he's talking about up there in Washington right now with this immigration, this guy is a Democrat. So I'm gonna stop saying that they are rhinos. They're not rhinos. You know how they talk about they are Republicans in name only. They're not Republicans in name only. These persons are progressives, and the most of the outright progressives are in the Democratic Party. That's almost like the Socialist Party over there. But if you think that we don't have progressives in the Republican Party, what was George Bush but a progressive? It's just that one is on steroids, and the other one is taking us down the pathway to socialism one's on a rail, one of those speed rails, and one is using the train. But they both going in the same direction, and both of them are progressive parties. These are not Republicans in name only. These are Democrats. These are progressives that we're listening to. So is I got in some trouble with this one last week because there's some people that think that this guy over here that's trying to lose weight because he's probably going to throw his hat in the ring in 2016. All the indications of it are, and that's Chris Christie over there in New Jersey. And if he's not a Democrat or a progressive, then we don't have anything to worry about. But these are progressives. These are not rhinos or Republicans in name only. As if and that's another thing. As if the Republican Party, you know how to say a Republican in name, as if the Republican Party is some kind of a place where there is salvation for the country. Where do we get that idea from? Conservatism is the salvation of this country. To go back to its principles is the salvation of this country. Republicans are not the salvation of the United States. They're part of the problem too, just as the Democrats are. So this idea that they are Republicans in name only, which is to say that the Republican Party is not the problem, is what Ted Cruz said. He said that he doesn't have any confidence. In fact, he said he didn't trust the Democrats and he didn't trust the Republicans either. That's a man after my own heart, because that's real. You can't trust either one of the parties. Nobody in Washington is serving the American people. These parties are not serving the American people. The government in Washington is government of the politicians, for the politicians, and by the politicians. And it stops right there. And there's no sense us getting out of being bent out of shape here, thinking that these parties represent the interests of the American people. You can't even find the interests of the American people up there being discussed. And if I'm wrong out there, if I'm wrong, those members of the House and you members on the House on the Senate Banking Committee investigating the IRS, let me hear you mention that we are going to downsize the IRS. That'll be a beginning point. You're not even going to talk about that. And then beyond that, we are going to eventually begin to place it on the emergency list, and we are going to import it out of here. We're going to export it out of the federal government and get it out of here and have a tax that doesn't have these undemocratic means that can be applied to it. We just simply say this is the rate, and everybody pays it, whether you have this income bracket or that income bracket. The one that makes $10 a year, you pay $1. That's fair. And those make $100 a year, you pay $10. That's fair also. Because your income is greater, you pay a percentage, but the percentage is greater the more money that you make. But everybody pays the same percentage of the income. And those that make a lot of money, you don't pay more percentage-wise because you made more. We want to encourage that process. We want to have everybody making more money, because the more you make, the more wealth you generate, the more income you pay to the government, the more the government has to pay its bills. They don't want that. They want the club. They don't. They prefer the power over the income. And if they don't, then why do we have Obamacare, which under Obama the government has grown by 40% over the last 5 years?
Hey, by the way, Mr. Moss, I ran into a guy over at Walmart the other day. I was buying a TV there, and the guy was who was like waiting on me at the counter there was a guy from Australia. And we started talking about, I said, well, you're probably now happier now you got Obamacare now here too because he lives here. He looks at me and goes, no, I don't like Obamacare. It's going to make the choice of me having to pay for that or get fined or pay for food each week. You know, because he's always working. You know, they don't get that many hours at Walmart. So he said, no, I hate Obamacare. He said it's a joke. He said I don't really care for the socialized medicine in Australia either. So,
wherever it's been applied, it has not worked, and we're going to see it. We had the best health system in the world. I mean, people were coming out of the socialist countries to come here for their care. We saw what happened in Venezuela. I mean, Venezuela didn't treat Chavez. They went to Cuba, and we see what that was. We see what happened as a result of that. Chavez left us. He didn't leave me. He left he left Sean Penn and Glover, Danny Glover, and Michael Moore. He didn't leave me, but Harry Belafonte, Jesse Jackson, and some of the people that went down there from the Congress, all these socialists that came out of the woodwork. But we see what happened there, and they're not going to be coming here because we're going into the same medical networks that does not work where they are. We used to have the greatest medical system in the world, and they're broken it. Not because they want better medical care. We're going to have worse medical care for a lot of reasons. What this is about is power, and wait until they add the numbers of people that have to enforce this medical care. One lady was on TV last week and looked at this bill. This bill is very intrusive, and she was saying that the employers are going to have to be making reports about you and us every month, because as your income changes, that changes your particular appropriation of what you in fact are paying for medical care. So it's not just going to be that they're intruding at April the 15th, but this being on the IRS, they're intruding on a daily basis, a weekly basis in your life, from check to paycheck. So this is we have not understood what this Obamacare is going to do in terms of people's lives and how it's going to affect us on a regular basis. The IRS is not going to be less intrusive, more intrusive. So no matter what they're talking about, this is a disaster waiting to happen. But it's about power, and it's not about more revenue is not about more service. Service, I think we need to take that word out of the IRS's acronym, put something else in there. Let's see, what else would fit? Internal Revenue State.
How about Goon Squad? IRS Goon Squad. I mean, that's basically what they are.
Yeah, we can do what they do with this network they call MSLSD. We can say the IRS Gestapo unit, which would be would let us know what these guys and these ladies are actually doing in that organization. And it absolutely cannot be reformed. That's just the bottom line. You can't reform it because it's undemocratic by its very existence. It has the power to compel you to do things even if what you've done is already within the rule of law. And it's not just this group. How many people out there have had the IRS come at you in the past simply because they didn't like your politics? And that's why they wanted that list, by the way, of the Tea Party. They didn't just want to know who you were, they want to know who your members are, send us your list of all the names of your members, and all of a sudden they're being audited.
Hey, well, how about they call it the Volunteer Enforcement Unit? That's what they're going to call it, Volunteer Enforcement Unit.
Yes, they are. And you can send them a check if you want to. If you don't, go ahead and buy a boat with the money, and there are no consequences. I mean, there's no person by the name of Wesley Snipes that's serving time, and there's no person by the name of Charles Rangel who did more than what Snipes did and is not serving any time. It's because one was involved in tax evasion, and then just one was sloppy with their taxes, such as Rangel. I mean, it's politics, and until we get the politics out of it, we're going to have these scandals going on every generation or so. When it comes to the surface again, like it did under Nixon, now we got it back again under the present administration that is shocked and can hardly believe that this in fact happened. We want you to have a wonderful Memorial Day, but if you're going to really memorialize the fallen warriors, quite frankly, we're going to have to rein in what is happening on the federal level. We've got to get control of the federal government so that we don't dishonor our fallen warriors on a daily basis because they died for the freedoms that we enjoy in this country. And if there are no freedoms, and we're heading in that direction, we're on the road to serfdom, been on it for a while, because that was talked about in F.A. Hayek's book in 1944, The Road to Serfdom. We're on the road to tyranny. And I can't think of a more disastrous way, a more dishonest way of dishonoring our fallen soldiers by, in fact, having them fight for freedom and dying for the freedoms of this country. And then the country is, in fact, having its freedom taken from it by its government. Somebody explain that to me. So on this occasion, on the day, let's think about our warriors, our fallen warriors, and let's think about what we must do to put this country on a course that honors those persons that gave their lives and sacrificed their lives for this nation's freedoms. Until next time, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you will never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.